Fire Your Boss for Good community. I am so excited to be here today. Thank you for joining us for our expert series. Today we're actually got a really cool guest with us, Tim. Tim Hampton is an expert in the concept of ideation. Now, some of you might be asking, well, what's ideation, Bob? But I got to tell you, it's a really cool way of taking an idea you might have or an idea you already have and really making sure that it fits to what it is that you want to do. Again, I'm Bob Minhas, founder of Fire Your Boss for Good. I'm so excited to be here with my guest, Tim Hampton. Tim, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here, Bob.
Tim, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my background is I have an engineering degree. And when I graduated in '93, the market wasn't too terrific for engineers. In fact, the people I was on the phone with were like, if you find a job, let me know. So as luck would have it, I got involved in computing. And so I went to work at York University in computing. And I've been there ever since, so for the last 20 years. And the most recent gig is as a director of computing in the Faculty of Fine Arts, what we call Arts, Media, Performance, and Design. So I'm the director of computing there, and I get to see creative people all the time. And so you get jealous, right? You're helping people teach online. You're helping people be creative. When's my turn? And so this business on the side that I call Repeatable Genius is about finding ways to be creative and innovative, and then helping people by giving them what I learn as I go.
Oh, I love that. And I have a bit of an advantage, Tim, because I've got to see you in action. I've seen so many people work with you and had such amazing results. So I'm really excited today to put this question on you. Are you ready,
Yes,
Tim? The question
I'm ready. Let's go.
Every expert. Tim, tell everybody watching, what is it that aspiring and new entrepreneurs need to understand about design thinking and ideation?
Perfect. That's a great combination. So the starting point with design thinking is, I call it the opposite or the antidote to hubris. So if you have this idea and you go into your basement and you spend $1 million working on that one idea, expecting it to be a market success, there's an excellent chance you're going to be disappointed because you haven't tested it with people, you haven't iterated. And so design thinking is all about this idea of get your audience, work with them, find out who your users are, get to understand the problem you're trying to solve first, and then show them prototypes. Don't just assume you are, they always say scratch your own itch. And that's great. That's a great place to start. But unless you can afford to be your only customer, you have to get other people involved. So that's one really important principle. And then the other principle is the iteration. So you have to approach them to say, I made this. Do you like this? What would you change? And then you get feedback, and you can progressively get more and more elaborate with your prototypes until you're ready to go with a true product. That may seem really...
And when you talk about prototypes, you talk about not just physical products, but services, coaching. Like really, your thinking, your way of thinking, can work with any type of idea.
Absolutely, and the prototypes can start very humbly. They can be made out of cardboard tubes and baling wire or whatever. It's really just the more it resembles the actual product, whether it's a mock-up of a website or a mock-up of a product, the more it resembles what's in your head, the more what they're seeing resembles what's in your head. Otherwise, you're just talking, you might be missing each other's point altogether, and you wind up with Homer's car. I don't know if you remember that Simpsons episode, but a year later, out comes this monstrosity they thought was going to do everything, because they never had that out on the table for both to see, the brother and Homer. So the thing about, I was about to say that it may remind you, because I know you look into all these different things, lean startup is a big, almost a Bible for companies that want to make it big. And what lean startup really says is it's about iteration, but it's also just about making the minimum viable product and getting it into the marketplace. So companies, like a lot of high-tech companies, when you're making a computer program, it's really easy to make something. It's really easy to make it's hard to make a minimum viable car, but it's pretty easy to make a minimum viable banking app. It just needs to do 3 things, boom. And if it's good, we'll make it do 4 things, 5 things, 6 things based on feedback. So the thing about lean startup is you have to sell something. That's the best barometer for success. And so they found that they were going too far in this idea that you have to make something that actually works as opposed to a prototype. So design thinking, which has been adopted heavily by Google, is Google Ventures, is a reaction to that. It's like pulling back and saying, well, we can still prototype a little. And so it doesn't matter to me whether you're prototyping or doing minimum viable products. The point is you're connecting with your audience, your users, and you're getting feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And so the challenge that comes from that is you get all this feedback over and over and over again. And every time you get that feedback, you have to come up with 20, 30 ideas on how to address the feedback and then narrow down.
Mm-hmm.
So it puts pressure on teams to come up with 20, 30 ideas every time they get feedback. It can be daunting. And so that's why ideation schemes like SCAMPER, tools like SCAMPER can be so useful. And that's one of the things I was hoping to talk about today.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So, Tim, just to put a little bit of perspective on, let's say, a local small business. So when I hear things like minimal viable product, a good example, I'm going to use two examples. One, I usually work with experts. So a minimal viable product with a coach, for example, could be just a basic program, a shell of a program. Is that fair?
Yep, it could be, or it could even be a brochure.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Just as simple as that.
You post the brochure on your website. How many people click it? You have 3 brochures. Which one gets clicked the most?
Yeah.
Right. And then you schedule, you book the room.
And then go through that way.
Yeah.
And then if I think of a foodpreneur, if I think of a gluten-free cupcake maker, their minimal viable product, would it be the cupcake or the recipe? Like, what to you would be the definition of their MVP?
Well, I mean, you can use your imagination, but I would say definitely have one SKU, one variety of cupcake. You don't have to make 30 varieties and expect to sell them all, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Make one. And also, you don't have to quit your job, buy a store, buy all the kitchen equipment, get certified. You can go to a fair and sell a dozen cupcakes and get feedback there. That's how you see a lot of foodpreneurs go. They start small, right? And then what you figure out if you tapped into something that people really will be willing to pay for, then you expand.
Perfect. Thank you. Let's talk about SCAMPER. Tell me more about this concept, SCAMPER.
Okay, so the reason I like SCAMPER is I look at it as kind of a catalyst for coming up with ideas. And there's a gentleman by the name of Brian Matamore. He's actually on LinkedIn, and he's written books on innovation. And he one of his concepts is that you need to have a catalyst, a way to force people to look in multiple different directions to solve a problem.
Okay.
And he uses the example of when he was called into Ben and Jerry's, and they had a new ice cream flavor, and it was fudge and strawberry. And they've been working apparently for over a month on how to come up with the name for this flavor. And they said, well, we need you to come in because you're the chief idea guy. And they gave him an afternoon to work with the people who had been banging their heads against the wall for a month.
Okay.
But the thing about brainstorming, when you say, you know the typical brainstorming, which is everybody give me your ideas. We want them all out on the table. We can sift through them. We can learn from one another. We can come up with better ideas, and then we can pursue one that works. But people get exhausted when they have to keep contributing ideas. Like, how do I come up? I already said one idea. I'm tired now, right? So you need a way to make people look in multiple directions. What Brian did at that event was he took a slang dictionary and he tore the pages out and he handed the pages out to people. And the result was that they came up with snafu, strawberries naturally all fudged up. So they used the slang to come up because he knew it was a counterculture brand. They'd really resonate with the slang. So the idea was that the idea is in there, but you need a mechanism to kind of draw it out. And that's what I like SCAMPER for. The word SCAMPER has 7 letters in it. SCAMPER.
Okay.
Each one of those letters is a way to force yourself to look in a different direction at the problem.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example. So we'll start with S. S stands for substitute. So I like to use a couple of examples because they're kind of universally approachable. One is, think about the Reese's peanut butter cup. Okay, we can all think about that. Maybe we shouldn't at this hour, but
yeah.
So that's a very successful product. What do you do when it's about as successful as it can be? Well, you make spin-off products. So what can I substitute about the peanut butter cup? And so, boom, you can come up with a new SKU, a new stock keeping unit, a new variety by going white chocolate on the outside or crunchy peanut butter on the inside. You substitute one of the ingredients and you wind up with a new product.
Right. Okay.
The same thing is applicable in the movie industry. So often what makes a movie interesting is when you take one element out of it that would be normal and substitute one that isn't, kind of a switcheroo. So like, think about Axel Foley in Beverly Hills Cop. You know, he's
my favorite movie.
All right, there we go.
It really is. It really is. I am Axel Foley.
Oh, all right. So you're here from Detroit.
Well, no, I can't work full time for any organization.
Oh, I see. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
But the fish out of water, right? You replace one element, it makes a much more interesting story.
Right.
And so that's another way of doing substitution.
Okay.
But it can also be quite seismic. You can change your entire business model. Think about Tesla. What are they doing? They're substituting gas power with electricity.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound that profound, but of course it is enormously profound. It's changing the landscape of cars. So that's the power of Scamper.
Right.
Is substitute. Am I scratching?
No, you know what? I just got this new T-shirt, and now I just realized it's all wrinkled.
You're showing it off.
I really am. I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. No,
It's good.
It's like, oh, it's all wrinkled. Sorry.
So what I like about Scamper is it's so widely applicable. So that substitute you can look at your business and say, what can I change for an advantage? And then you can come up with many ideas just with that one letter. And then of course there's 6 more if you have time.
Perfect. Yes, let's do it. If you got,
so the next one is C is for combine.
Okay.
And so think about the Reese's peanut butter cup again. You can combine Reese's pieces, and this is an actual candy. They take the cup and they put the candy in it.
Okay.
Am I holding? My internet's saying it's unstable.
Oh,
are we good?
It might be me. I'm unstable.
Okay.
I don't know. We'll see. It might
just
be
the internet.
Yeah, just the internet. Yeah.
And then combining, you can do that with movies too.
Okay.
So think about the log line. So the briefest description of a movie is called a log line. The log line for Aliens was Jaws in space. So you take 2 genres and you put them together and you wind up with something interesting. And Miami Vice was called MTV Cops. You take 2 things and put it together.
Okay. Right.
So this is actually a very fruitful line of thinking. The Swiss Army knife is combining multiple things into one. The clock radio is a classic example because it takes the radio and the clock, which are both useful, but when you put them in the same chassis, they're more useful because now the clock can control the radio. It takes up less space. You've got 1 plug instead of 2. So, there are advantages to combining things sometimes. So that's combine. That's one of the powerful ones. The A in Scamper is for adapt.
Okay.
And it's kind of the cheat code. Everything else is what you do to your product to make it better, or your service to make it better. A is a cheat code because it basically says copy from somebody else. So the way you do that with candy, you say we're not making candy, we're making groceries, and so you can get Reese's peanut butter,
and
you can get Reese's chocolate at the grocery store like a staple. And
Okay.
so the kid sees that, they're like, "Mommy, can we get that one?"
Yeah.
Or, "Daddy, can we get that one?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And then for movies, adapt. Well, the word adaptation, it says it right in there, right? So you do an adaptation from a theater play or a book or a video game. You've seen all kinds of movies that are done that way, or even a TV show.
Yeah.
Some with not very great success, but some are awesome, right?
I would agree. Yeah. Yeah. My favorite one is the adaptation of the Avengers comics into the Avengers movies.
Yes, you were saying.
I'm obsessed, right? With that for sure.
We'll have to talk later about. Somebody told me somebody died in one of these movies, and I hadn't seen it yet.
Oh, again, no spoilers. But I will tell you, I watched that movie 7 times. I still cry. Like I can't stop crying during that death scene. It's horrible.
All right. Yeah. We'll say no more in case somebody's watching this. It's almost 2020, people. No, we can't be spoiling it for you.
After some point, they need to be more responsible, right? But I will tell you, soggy popcorn, tear-filled popcorn doesn't taste good. I will give you that. That's a combination that I don't suggest.
No, that's not a great combination, but a great adaptation.
Oh, okay.
Coming back to adaptation is biomimicry. So it's a way of saying, the thing about adaptation is saying, if it works over there, why doesn't it work over here? That's really what's going on. And so why is it that a shark can swim so quickly? They've done models and they've tested and they've done analysis, and it really boils down to, in part, the scaly surface of the skin. Okay. And so Airbus has applied that texture to planes and actually found it gave them less wind resistance. So if it works over there, it might work over there. Yeah. So adaptation.
Yeah.
Um,
I had heard this story, Tim, and maybe you can tell me if it's true or not. The story of how Apple came up with one of its prototypes for iMac. Remember those all-in-one CPUs?
yeah, yeah.
And that casing was actually something they adapted from the candy and gumball industry. That I guess it was
Oh, interesting.
they
The actual bubble shape.
well, but even the material, the manufacturing process, because I think what had happened was, my understanding was,
Yeah.
IBM and all these other computers were all metal casing, and Apple was looking for a way to create something that was a little bit more trendy, if you will.
Right.
And so they were trying to mimic this case, but no matter what they did, the heat from the CPU, all of that wouldn't work. And I gotta look this up, but the story I had heard was one of the engineering team went to, I think it was the team that did Jawbreakers, and tried to understand how did that encompass
Yeah.
what it did, and use that methodology, applied
Yeah.
it to their industry, right?
That is a great example. That is a
Okay.
great example, and it's an example of something I love, which is one industry cribbing from another.
Right.
Um, and I forget who it was, but somebody was saying that one of the best conferences he's ever been to was the plumbers and cardiac surgeons conference, because they could learn so much from one another, because they both basically do the same thing, which is fix tapes. Right?
That's a
There
really
were
good
actually
point. That's true.
a fruitful synergy between those two groups.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's totally true.
So we're up to A now.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
No. I just, I want to be mindful of our time. So M is for minimize and maximize.
Okay.
It's a cheat, right? You get to use 2 letters if you want.
That's fine.
So, and of course, in the peanut butter world, you can picture the large Reese's peanut butter cup, right? You've seen those in the store. A way to get a different SKU on the shelf, occupy more shelf space, get more sales.
Right.
Also, Reese's Minis, which are diabolical, right? We'll just have 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And you threw the whole bag.
Yeah.
Genius.
Yeah.
And then the other example I like is the television. So one of the things that happens when you go from a tube TV, we're old enough to remember those, the glass CRT
Correct.
TVs.
Yes.
You go to a flat screen TV, your TV is basically, it has a width and a height, but the depth doesn't change no matter how big it is.
Correct.
Whereas with a tube TV, if you doubled the length and the width, you had to double the depth as well. Okay. So all of a sudden, now you can maximize the size of the screen without, it only goes up by a factor of 4 when you double it, not a factor of 8. So that's an example of how you can seize on opportunities and think, can I go big? Can I go small? So another example of that is the whale stays warm in frigid waters because it's enormous. It's because as you get bigger, your surface area doesn't go up as fast as your interior volume. Okay. So and the reason I bring that example up is look at the Tesla Gigafactory. Okay. So sometimes when you expand, some expenses go up linearly, some go up really fast, some don't really go up at all. What Elon Musk said was, why is it that if I take a battery out of a computer, it's about $100. I need 1,000 of those to run a car. That's $100,000 just for the battery alone. It's impossible. Everybody says it's impossible. He said, well, hold the phone. It's not impossible. We haven't really looked at the math properly. And he said, look at the ingredients, the materials that go into the battery. They don't cost anywhere near 100 grand. What's slowing us down is production. It's the production cost. Well, how do you bring production costs down? Volume.
Right.
Well, that's why we have the Gigafactory. The Gigafactory is a reaction to that math. It says if the material cost is linear, and then the cost goes down per unit, the bigger I get, then I have to get as big as possible. And then the other example of minimize is if you think about a flea can sit on the surface of the water. Okay, and that's because its weight dropped by a factor of 8 as it went down and as it shrunk 50% in size. So each time you do that, so you get to the point where just the surface tension on the water can hold you up. So these are examples of how you can play with size to get a new idea for your company.
Right. Interesting. Okay. I love it.
All right. So P is my favorite. P is for put to another use. I know. That'll be the clip.
I should have warned you. I am.
That's good. Yeah. All right. I'll have to think that one through. But put to another use is my favorite part of Scamper. So put to another use, how can Reese's, so think about it with me here. How can Reese's sell more chocolate for a different purpose? Seasonal treats, right? Like, so
Right. So
my
like
son is 15, but he's
right.
still all over these Reese's Advent
Oh,
calendars, right?
okay.
Or Halloween chocolate,
Right.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's
So you
great.
can put the same product, you just put a different wrapper on it. It has a different purpose now.
Yeah, yeah. Amazing.
And in the movies, so how can we put a movie to a different use? Well, you can have a spin-off like The Making of. You can make
Yeah,
money from the stuff you were doing anyway, or you can
yeah.
have sequels, or you can have reboots and that kind of thing. So they get a lot of they never leave any meat on the bone in the movie industry. There's always a way to put it to another use.
Yeah, agreed.
One of my favorite examples of put to another use is SpaceX. If you think about the space shuttle, okay, the space shuttle went up like a rocket and came down like a plane.
Okay.
It came down like a plane, so it had to have wings, it had to have control surfaces, it had to have landing gear, it had to have parachutes. That's an awful lot of weight to launch into space when putting a pound costs $1 million, right? When you think about the amount of money it takes to put things into orbit, you're taking all this gear that's only there to help you land. So SpaceX said, well, we can go up propulsively, we can go up like a rocket, we'll come down like a rocket. And that's why it's so genius that it comes down on its tail. It's putting that same propulsion system to another use. All the gear that it takes to go up, they can reuse to come down. And so you can see enormous savings that come from that.
Yeah.
So, I missed my favorite story.
Which one?
So,
Okay. Okay.
adapt.
Okay.
So think about the what do they call the fridge? The mini bar in a
Yeah, the mini fridge.
hotel, right?
Oh,
The
the
mini
mini bar.
fridge
Yeah, 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 yeah.
that you can have a chocolate bar or
Yeah.
whatever out
Or
of it, and then
whatever.
you wind up paying for it,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Well, somebody looked at an empty fridge and said, how can we make more money with this empty fridge? Somebody turned around and said, we have an empty closet. How can we make money with this empty closet? So this hotel in Washington paired up with Neiman Marcus. And if you were renting a hotel room, they'd say, do you mind if we know your measurements? And they would fill the closet with clothes that would fit you. And you could buy them if you wanted to. Try them on in your own hotel room.
Oh my goodness,
Right?
that's
Brilliant.
genius.
And so it's a
Yeah.
way to up the revenue, which I
Yeah.
really like. Okay, so we're at E, which is for eliminate.
Yes. Oh, okay.
Okay,
Okay.
so I got two great stories for Reese's Pieces fans out there, which is
Okay.
probably all we have left right now.
That's all right.
Okay.
That's all right. Yeah.
So I was looking for something where the candy actually, like they eliminated the peanut butter or the chocolate or whatever, but I kind of covered that when I made the grocery selections. But I came across two great stories. One was back, I think 2017-ish. There was a rumor circulated that Hershey's was going to eliminate the Reese's Piece. Did you hear that?
No.
There was a national panic. People
Okay.
thought, oh my God, my favorite candy is going to be discontinued, which gave them an opportunity to come on to all the news networks and go, no, hold, it's okay. We're going to keep making it. So it was a marketing coup for them.
Okay. Okay. No
The other
publicity is
thing,
bad publicity is what they were going for.
well, but how bad is that? Everybody's like
Yeah.
bemoaning the possibility this is going to be disappearing. You would get people hoarding it quite possibly, right? So then the other thing they did was, I think this is even more recent, they had a machine in New York, one of the big parks, where after Halloween, you could drop off your bad candy and get Reese's products out. It's just a machine where you pour candy in one, and then they give you some candy. But it was a great gimmick because that's what you do after Halloween is you sort the bad candy from the good, and they're like, we're the good.
Yeah.
But with this mechanism, they literally eliminated the competition, sort of symbolically. Right?
No, for sure. Yeah.
And then, so I had a great example for eliminate, but it'll come to me later. And then the final letter in Scamper to round this up is reverse and rearrange.
Okay.
So a peanut butter cup with the peanut butter on the outside, okay, is an example of a reversal. How can we make this another variety of this product? And then in the movies, the reversal, have you ever seen the movie Memento?
Yeah, I love that
Yes.
movie.
Okay. So the gimmick there, the what makes that movie so interesting is they took a linear story, but they showed it to us backwards.
Yeah.
And the reason
Yeah.
that was so clever is because the character in it had amnesia,
Mm-hmm.
and so we were just as disoriented as him.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a
Mm-hmm.
reversal. And
Mm-hmm.
then I'll wrap up with a story from New York again. It's about a tour bus company. Now you think about what it's like to be on a tour bus. You're always
Mm-hmm.
peering over somebody's head, right?
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
can't see anything. They
Mm-hmm.
actually took the inside of the bus and made it like an amphitheater. They took
Okay.
all the seats and made them face out the side, and they had stadium seating, so you could see everybody had the best seat in the house in the bus,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, okay.
So to wrap up the whole idea of Scamper, there's
Yeah.
multiple ways of doing this. But what
Yeah.
I love about Scamper is if you and I were going to sit down, or if you alone are going to sit down and say, I need to come up with 7 ideas at least,
Mm.
it forces you to pick up 7 ideas to solve the
Mm.
problem you're looking at.
Yeah.
And so it gets you past that kind of writer's block. And if you
Yeah.
get 5 people in a room, you just got 35 ideas.
Yeah.
Right?
You know what kills me about this, Tim? It is so universal, right? Like I'm literally, as you're talking, in my head, it's just the natural part of me is like, okay, well, where can't this work? But really, cross
Right.
industry, it really doesn't matter. The concepts that you're bringing forth are just, again, 7 ways of looking at the same problem. That's really it, and finding a
Yeah,
solution,
exactly right.
which is wonderful. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
And the thing is that your first idea is rarely your best idea. So
Right.
this forces you to come up with multiple ideas, and it plays into the design thinking thing because now you have multiple ideas to present to your customer or client or whatever, and say, how do you respond to this?
Yeah. And you know, I love, so since this new venture for me, one of the big things I've been looking at is when we talk about entrepreneurship, how does that bleed or how does that infect, if you will, other parts of your life? So I could literally see someone saying to me, Bob, you know, my partner and I are having a challenge or an issue. Maybe our marriage has fallen stale. And it's like, I could see you, which I don't mean to be crass, but using Scamper to say, all right, let's figure out some ways to reinvigorate. Or your child is constantly saying they're bored. Let's use Scamper to figure out
Sure.
like, that's what I really, really love about this. It's
Yeah.
not just entrepreneurially universal. It really is universal in life.
Well, and that's also true for design thinking
Okay.
because there's actually a book out by one of the 2 people who are kind of the leading voices in design thinking. I
Mm-hmm.
forget what it's called, but I forget their names, but it's called Design Your Life.
Okay.
And so the idea is if you want to, have you seen the movie I Bought a Zoo or We Bought a Zoo?
I watch a lot of movies. You're
Okay.
Matt Damon. Yes, I've seen
Yes,
it. Yeah.
I probably won't watch it because it just sounds like a horrible idea. But the thing is, you know, maybe it had a happy ending, or maybe it was a huge debacle. I don't know. Don't spoil it for me. Don't spoil it for anybody out there.
No, we're good. We're good. We're good.
But what they say in the book, Design Your Life, is if you want to own a zoo, maybe you should go work in one for a while. Maybe you should go volunteer in one for a while. Like, why are you, if you have to sell everything you own to do something you think you want to do, then maybe you need to take a baby step. And that's just as true for entrepreneurs as it is in our personal life. And so that's one of the things that I would really like to emphasize that people do is don't bet the farm. Like we tend to think of design thinking. Design thinking, it's almost apologetic in the way it's framed a lot of the time. Like, oh, it's not really design. It's a way that designers think to make sure they come up with something useful. And then we call it human-centered, but all that really means is you're validating your market. Like they try to make it sound all left brain logical, right?
Right. Right.
But it's important to get in touch with, you know, the humanity of who you're trying to serve and even the humanity of who you are and what you want to serve. And so I think that's I don't want people to lose touch of this idea of human-centeredness that's embedded in design thinking. It's a great way to validate what you're doing and making sure you're happy with what you're doing and people are happy with what you're doing.
I love that. I love because, you know, and especially in the time of our economy now, I always drive this, or I try and drive this concept of, you know, in 2020 and beyond, at least for the next 10, 15 years, it doesn't matter where technology is taking us. People are hungry for connection. Human connection should always have some component in business. you know, when I hear people say, Tim, like, oh, you know, Uber's just an app, or, well, there's always some component of human connectiveness in the most successful apps. Now, we won't talk about Uber's financial situation. I just mean in perception.
Well, I can pick up on that with the story from Airbnb, right?
Yeah, okay.
So Airbnb is kind of a classic minimum viable product. It's literally short for airbed and breakfast, right? And it was a couple of college guys. They had a conference coming to town, and they're like, "Rent our room." That's how they started. It was. I
heard they just had stuff on their floor, like they just said, "Here's some mattresses."
It was a futon or something.
Yeah,
maybe even an air mattress.
Yeah, you're right, 100%. Yeah.
And so I forget where I was going with this, but
we were talking about Airbnb and
and Uber, and so. The thing about Airbnb is they are very good at doing this design thinking thing, which is trying small things out and getting feedback. And one of the things they did was they had this theory, which makes sense. All theories make sense until you test them.
Right.
And that is better pictures, better listings, better response from people.
Okay.
And so they sent professional photographers. They just hired people out of Kijiji or whatever, or I guess it would be Craigslist. They just sent them to these listings that they had on Airbnb, took better photos, and they got twice the revenue.
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
Yeah.
And so the reason I picked up on your point is it's a very human-centered thing.
Yes.
You want to see where you're going. You want to see if there's a toaster on the counter. You want to see if there's a coffee maker on the counter. What does the bed look like? Are there 4 pillows or 2?
Yeah.
It's a human need to know where we're going to go. So I think that's a great example of human-centeredness.
Yeah.
Even with Uber, they tell you your driver's name.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. And they don't just tell you it's going to be roughly 5 minutes. They tell you it's going to be 5 minutes, and they show you the route the driver's taking.
Yeah.
So it takes that anxiety out of waiting.
Yeah.
These are all human things. A robot would just sit there and wait.
Yeah.
But so even though technology is mediating it, we can still make it a human-centered experience.
And I think when people talk about customer service, I think we've actually moved into customer experience, which is what human-centeredness really focuses on, is what's that experience pre, during, and post-sale, right?
Exactly.
And I think you're right. These brands have really, really, really picked up on it more than anything. Tim, I want to ask you one last question. I know we've taken a lot of time, but it always comes into my head. I always think of the story of YouTube, how there was a platform similar to YouTube that had launched in the early 2000s, which failed completely. And it was simply because at that time, internet connectivity isn't what it was later when YouTube came to pass.
Right.
Talking about, when you talk about design thinking and ideation, where do you talk about timing? Is the market ready? Like, is this the right time? Like, does that come into any of the SCAMPER methodologies as well?
It doesn't inherently, but one analogy I've heard recently that I really like, that I think plays into this, if you're a photographer and you want a picture of a bird flying out of the nest, you do something called compose and wait.
Okay.
So you line your camera up, you set your zoom, and you know eventually the bird's coming out.
Yeah.
And so at that split second, you press the trigger and you take your 6 shots in a row, and you've got maybe that National Geographic cover. Right?
Yeah.
So this applies to, so I use the story of the space shuttle versus the SpaceX method of coming down on your tail.
Right.
Well, when the space shuttle was being designed in the 70s, the technology to do that didn't exist. The fundamental question of should we land on the tail is, how's the pilot going to see where he's going in the 70s? Right? Now it's robotic everything. Everything can be automated, and this technology exists now. Elon Musk has been thinking about going to Mars since he was a little boy. I mean, part of it, he composed and waited until he was a billionaire. Good move. But he also waited until the technology was available. The same thing with Solar City, the same thing with Tesla. He's able to wait until the technology looks like it's available. That's why he did PayPal first. That technology was available when he wanted to create a business.
That's a really good point. So, I mean, when somebody goes through this ideation process, part of what they should be really considering is the market ready for this. I see a lot of people, we talk about betting the farm a lot, because you and I have probably met a lot of entrepreneurs who have really, it's really backfired on them. And so I do talk about timing a lot, because I always say it doesn't mean that it's a bad idea. It just means maybe it's not ready for this time. But I find that people get so impatient, Tim. They just say, I'm just going to do it, and people will catch on.
Yeah, and I think you're highlighting the fact there's 2 scenarios. One is you aren't ready to make it because the technology doesn't exist, or it's just too expensive, or they aren't ready for it.
Right.
And we'll have to see how the world reacts to the Tesla pickup
Mhm. Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
a lot of people in the world aren't ready for that shape,
Right.
but
Right.
its shape is dictated by the wind tunnel and practicalities about the interior volume and that kind of thing. It's
Hmm.
not dictated about where's the engine and how do we get to service it and how much heat's coming off the engine. There is no engine,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
so they're able to make a shape that's entirely, but we may not be ready for it. We'll have to see.
Okay. I'm looking forward to that. A dear friend of mine, I'm happy to introduce him to you, Patrick Liver. He actually put in a pre-order.
Oh,
He's
on a
got it
truck?
on a truck. Yeah. He said,
Excellent.
I thought he said that the pre-order was only $150.
Yeah, it
It
is.
was a really low barrier.
It's not a big commitment, but I
Yeah.
think so. What Tesla has done with that design is they've minimized the cost of production because
Right.
it's origami. You just fold it,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's exciting. It's awesome. Tim, I'm so sorry. I know that I've taken you away from your family for so long. I really, really, really
It's been a
appreciate.
pleasure.
I
Yeah.
know. I geek out every time I hear you talk, Tim, or just do your thing. I just lose my mind. There's very few minds like yours in the world that I think, and there might be more, but they speak different languages. So the fact that you're
Russian.
here,
Yeah.
the fact that you're here in Canada is one of our treasures. I love it, Tim. Before we go, I know there are people who are watching this and they're like, how do I find Tim? How do I find? They're probably Googling you right now. What's the best way for people to connect with you and maybe even work with you?
Okay, perfect. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah,
So
of course.
my company's called Repeatable Genius.
Right.
And the idea behind that is we're looking for ways that we can create innovative ideas on demand.
Right.
So it's Repeatable Genius, a method for coming up with that anytime. And so it's repeatablegenius.com.
Okay.
And so you'll see me there, you'll see my contact there, and you'll also see under Explore, I have a PDF downloadable that goes into Scamper.
Oh,
So you can actually
wonderful.
download that and follow it. If you have a meeting of, if you either you want to ideate on your own or you have a meeting with 5 people, you can follow that and come up with 7 ideas. I'd also welcome people connecting with me on LinkedIn,
Mm-hmm.
and that's also available. There's a link to my profile from repeatablegenius.com.
Okay. And do you have any events coming up? I know I've been blessed to be able to check out some of your events. Do you have any
Yeah,
more?
thank you. It's been wonderful to see you there.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of things a couple irons in the fire.
Okay.
I'm working with an engineering firm. I won't say their name yet until we iron out all the details, but I'm really excited about this idea of a co-creation event. So
Oh,
whenever you probably have heard many people saying you can make a lot of money on Kickstarter. Just come up
yeah.
with a product,
Yeah.
do the engineering, and here's a market for you. It
Mm-hmm.
validates for you. It's
Mm-hmm.
great. But
Mm-hmm.
who does the engineering? And will it actually work? And can you actually produce what you're promising? So
Mm-hmm.
what I have an engineering firm in mind. They're really excited about working with me on this because they want to become more innovative. But what
Mm-hmm.
they're recognizing is they have to get people to innovate with, no
Mm-hmm.
matter what. You can't do it in a vacuum. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to sort of try and bring chocolate and peanut butter together with people on Eventbrite and people at this firm to work together to come up with new ideas and maybe even come up with prototypes.
It sounds almost like a component of Startup Weekend, which is wonderful because we don't do a lot of startup weekends anymore.
Yeah.
Which
So
is
yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So
I love.
if you follow me on LinkedIn, I'm definitely
Mhm.
going to announce the progress on that there.
And Tim Hampton, which I know they can see your name there, so they can find you that way.
Yes.
Awesome.
All
Tim,
right.
thanks so much for making the
It's been a
time. I really,
pleasure.
really
You're a great
appreciate it.
host.
Oh, you got me going forever. I love it. I thank you so much. So for those viewers who are still watching, thank you once again for joining us. We will be having another expert on the series very, very soon. It may be difficult or hard for us to follow Tim, but we're going to try and do it with his lovely partner, Camilla. So we're going to put those two head to head. Actually, we should release both your episodes at the same time.
No, I don't want to compete with Carmela.
Okay. All right. Fair. Tim, thanks again. You
Thank
have
you.
the most amazing evening, and we will talk again soon.
You too.
All right. Bye now.